Hello everyone and welcome to Collection Reflection. Today we will be reflecting on Zombie Iron Man from Marvel Legends What If. And before we even take a look at the packaging, we're going to answer the question, should you collect this figure or reflect it? At a price point of roughly $25 before tax, I think you have to reflect this figure. If you're interested in learning why, stay tuned. Here's the front of the packaging. Nice little clips from the show on the side. There's a cool product shot of Iron Man and all the accessories that he's going to come with. He's part of the Khonshu wave, but as you can see here, he does not come with a piece to build that figure. The top, the bottom. Let's start off by looking at the highlight of this figure, and probably the only reason why it's worth picking up, and that's going to be this awesome head sculpt. You can see all the gashes and missing pieces of flesh all over his face, and even this part right up here seems to be a bruise because it's on the packaging as well. So I thought that was a cool little detail that they included. I like his yellow eyes, they almost look like they're glowing. They painted that little nose cavity black. And this big gash across his forehead is also painted black. You can see straight through his cheeks. And the hair sculpt is actually pretty nice. I like how it looks a little messed up, but also still put together. He's probably got some hair gel in it. From the product shots, I was a little concerned about that mustache. I thought it'd look just kind of like a smudge on his face. But when you're looking at the figure as a whole, it actually kind of works together. You can see that the teeth and the gum lines are painted, as well as the tongue. I think that's a really nice touch. And it pretty much brings this whole look together. I believe this is the Infinity War armor Iron Man with a few extra pieces and maybe some more paint apps like these dirty smudges. That's possibly blood or just muck. There you can see those exposed ribs. The rest of the figure is just about the same as the previous release. I do like the color of his armor and all the little silver and gold accents that they have throughout. His arc reactor is painted in white. I would have preferred it to be blue, but maybe that's just this style of armor. The only other piece of exposed flesh besides his ribs is there on his forearm. I think it would have been awesome if they would have just put a little bit more gore into this figure and really leaned into that zombie aspect. The figure does look great, and that's something I definitely can't deny. One problem I had with this figure though is out of the package, his arms could not straighten out further than that. They were almost always in this permanent bent position. So that was something that I definitely had to fix because that was incredibly annoying. And with that being said, why don't we just go straight into the articulation so I can talk to you more about this figure. His head is on a ball joint and it will go 360. It can go back a little bit, down pretty well, and there's also a little bit of tilt. His arms can rotate 360. His arms can go up past 90. He's got no butterfly joints, but he is in a suit of armor, so that kind of makes sense. He has 360 bicep, double jointed elbows with the pins, a swivel in the wrist, with a high five hinge. But it only goes up that far. So he can't even do a high five, it's more of a fist bump at this point. He has a 360 diaphragm. It goes back barely and forward almost none at all. He can do the splits about that far. He's got pretty good forward and barely any back. He has a thigh cut that does break up the sculpt, but I am very okay with it. Double jointed knees with the pins. He has no swivels, but his ankle can turn down that far and go back up pretty far as well. And it does have nice tilt. You can go pretty much all the way around with it. His articulation is decent, especially if you include the fact that he is in a suit of armor, so he's not going to be as mobile as he should be. However, this is his Infinity War armor, so it is nanotech. So he should be able to move around a little better than his other armors. But it's still an Iron Man figure at the end of the day, so it makes sense. Let's check out the accessories that he comes with. He comes with a set of interchangeable repulsor blasting hands, but there is no hinge on these whatsoever, and I think that's absolutely unacceptable. I understand they might have had these same accessories from the last time they released this figure, but there's no excuse as to why they couldn't just remold some hands with some hinges in them. Because it makes these pretty much useless unless you have them firing the repulsor. Luckily, they do include 2 repulsor energy blasts. They're both sculpted pretty much the exact same, and we've seen them many times before. You're able to plug the repulsor blast into his hand, and it stays in there just fine. Here's what he looks like with his interchangeable hands, and it looks great. I like the pose that they chose for the hands and the fingers. But if he's not firing a repulsor blast or getting ready to, then they're just useless. When you put him down to his side, they look a little ridiculous. And the repulsor blast can peg into the feet as well as the hands. I think if they would have actually included an armored version of the Iron Man head sculpt for this figure, that would make the $25 price point a little bit more manageable. I understand that the helmeted version was not in this episode of What If, but it still would have been great for the figure to have. How about I stop my complaining for now, and we'll just move on to some comparisons. Here are a couple of Marvel legends who are in the Iron family. On the left we have Ironheart, and on the right we have the Iron Spider. Even though Ironheart was released before this version of Iron Man, she gets a lot of the things right that he gets wrong, including those hingeable repulsor hands and that awesome neck joint that she has for flying poses. Now we have a couple of Transformers. Here's a Deluxe class and a Voyager class. You can see that Iron Man is shorter than these 2 Dragon Stars figures. If you're going from the top of their head, he's a little bit taller than Janemba, and he's about the same height as Cell. But if you include their horns, they're going to be bigger. At the 5-inch scale, we have the BST, AXN, Bebop, and Raphael. They both come up to just the beginning of his shoulder. Now at the 4-inch scale, we have some of my favorite villains of all time, the Reverse Flash and Deathstroke from DC Spin Master. From the Vintage Collection, we have a Sith Trooper and an Imperial Guard. And from the Final Faction, we have the ACRM and General Diabol, both of which have been customized by myself to give them added articulation. And it wouldn't be a collection reflection comparison if we didn't compare him to Pumpkin Rapper's head. Because that head is just too big. Even though I think you should reflect this figure for now, that doesn't mean that I hate it. As I said before, this head sculpt alone could be worth purchasing this figure. But if you don't really care about the head sculpt and you weren't a big fan of the What If episode, or you're not trying to complete the set of the Marvel Zombies, then I definitely say this is not worth your time. Especially if you already have another Marvel Legends Iron Man. Not being able to look up correctly to get a good flying pose, and having these elbows that are just always a little too bent, plus the extra repulsor hands that do not have a hinge, there's just too much about this figure that I can complain about. I just don't feel like I'm getting my $25 plus tax worth out of this figure, but maybe you will. When looking for ways to enhance this figure, I immediately wanted to fix those elbow joints. So what I did was take an X-Acto knife and just try to carve my way through this elbow piece so that it would allow enough clearance to slide over the forearm. That way he could actually straighten out his elbow completely. As far as the neck joint goes, all I tried to do was carve out a little bit more space for the neck peg to bend backwards, and it did help a little bit. As you can see there, that would normally be its stopping point, but I was able to get it just a little further back. However, it's still not enough clearance for him to actually look like he's in a flying pose, and I'm a little worried to continue cutting because I don't want to just make the neck joint loose altogether. And as far as these hands, I have yet to come up with a reasonable solution as to how I can include some sort of a hinge for them. So if you have any idea on how to include extra hinges into your figure, please let me know in the comments down below, or message me on any of these social media websites. I would also really like to see any kind of enhancements or customizations that you've done to this figure. I'm really curious to know, do you usually watch toy reviews with headphones on or not? Because I know my audio sounds differently depending on which one you're using. So please let me know in the comments down below, are you watching this video with headphones on? Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you can find some time in your day to have a nice chuckle. And please, try to be kind to somebody, especially someone you don't know, because you could really change their life. I'll talk to you next time.